right, welcome to the Smart Webinar number 3. This one's a video recording because I'm just getting over not feeling the greatest, and of course now it's going through the whole family, so fingers crossed. These are all the ebbs and flows that come with training, and just all part of the game. But what I wanted to pick up on where we left off in the last webinar, which was running. So we were going through each discipline. Let me flip over there. So some basic information about swimming, some tips. Then we went into equipment, some of my recommendations, and obviously the most important pieces, or at the minimum, would be at the top. And then as you progress down, those become more and more optional, I would say, as you progress. Then we talked a little bit about swim technology, some things that you would need if you were going to use platforms like Triathlon or Training Peaks to quantify your data and get more into the analytical side of the training. And of course, how to set those training zones, which is the last step that you really need to understand before getting your software all set up and going, which is what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. Again, we covered how to determine training zones for swimming and biking. We're going to finish up with running today. So I gave a whole bunch of these examples, which I killed a little bit. Again, we did the same with cycling, talked about some differences between indoor and outdoor training, benefits, and things you might want to consider, as well as the basic training equipment, technology, training zones, and then how to determine those zones for biking. So last one is running. Now, obviously, you have lots of different options in how you can run. You have treadmill when it's wintertime and you can't get outside. Obviously, most people prefer to run outside. And of course, then you have access to either roads, trails, tracks. Again, depends where you live. Different terrain, obviously, and all things that you need to consider when you're setting up your training program. So indoor training, couple of benefits I just wanted to cover on that. Really nice for when you can't get out to maintain your consistency. But I'll also say for the consistency topic, really nice when you're doing intervals that you can just set the pace perfectly. You don't have to worry about grade or elevation changes, and you can just hammer out the intensity that is being programmed by your software or your coach. So for that aspect, it works really nicely. I would say for hill training, treadmills are the best because you don't have to go back downhill to do the next repeat. Unless you have a super long one, you can just keep climbing up, but usually what goes up must come down eventually, and that eccentric loading, the impact of running downhill or even walking downhill is usually where the highest risk of injury is when running hill repeats. On a treadmill, really nice because you can just set it up and then bring it back down again. You don't have to hit any downhill. So I'd say for early season hill training, get a little bit of power going. Treadmill is the best for that. Climate controlled, so you can control your climate. That being said, if you don't have a fan on you, that ambient air sitting around you heats up quite significantly. So you do need to be aware of that, but it is nice to be able to dress however you like, cool, warm, depending on your environment. And again, you can control for all those variables. Increased need for cooling, like I mentioned. If you don't have a fan, you are going to need to have probably more hydration and electrolytes. But it's really nice because you can have it right there on the treadmill. So it's easy access. You don't have to worry about carrying everything. So having that ability is a huge benefit for training consistently. And then I already talked about this one, having that access without your nerd belts or having to carry a bottle. That being said, I would highly recommend doing that when you're running outside as well. Every run I do, I am going to bring some sort of fuel, or I'm going to really focus on pre-fueling and post-fueling. Someone was going to call me on that one, I know it. Sometimes if it's 45 minutes or a real short one and it's outdoors and it's cool, I can get away with it. But anything significant, definitely want to make sure that you're consuming carbohydrates, consuming electrolytes, and keeping the fluids coming in. So outdoor training, obviously way more stimulating. You can look at the scenery, You're not just staring at the treadmill timer or the wall or whatever's in front of you. So obviously for long runs, highly recommend running outdoors. You don't want to do all your training on the treadmill because running outside with the toe off and actually having to propel your body forward as opposed to the belt just moving underneath you actually matters. Again, best stimulus for races. So we don't race on treadmills unless you're doing an indoor triathlon. So again, you want to get used to running outdoors as well as the variable terrain. If you are doing a race with lots of hills, you want to make sure that you're prepared for that. If you're only running flat and you're going into a hilly course, you might be in for a little rude awakening. So there are variable environmental conditions. You always have to dress for the occasion and sometimes wear layers because obviously once you warm up and heat up, you might need to shed a little bit. So that's always a consideration outside. And again, really pay attention to the environmental conditions. Obviously cooler runs, you don't have to hydrate as much. Warmer runs, you're going to have to pick it up quite a bit. And you do need to figure out how you're going to carry that, whether you're going to run some loops and come back for hydration, whether you're going to be able to carry enough, totally up to you. It is weird at first carrying a fuel belt or a bottle. Eventually you'll get used to it, and I guarantee you it will be better than depleting yourself and having all that extra time that it takes to rebuild or rehydrate. And you may need to change your metrics based on terrain. So again, indoors on a treadmill, you can run just pace, nice and clean. Running outdoors, if it's a flat terrain, flat road, track, you can run by pace, and that's usually what it defaults to. If you start running hills and you don't have a power meter, then you're going to default to heart rate. And if you do have a power meter, I would say the best on the market at the moment is the Stride Power Pods. They are the ones that have the patent at the moment on power meters in a foot pod, which is a lot more accurate than some of the power meters in our watches or heart rate straps. Then you can also run by power. And again, just like cycling, power is the gold standard of everything because power is power. It's instantaneous, and it doesn't matter whether you're going uphill or downhill. So a couple other basics in terms of running. Progressive overload for running is the most important. The research has come back. I should put a link up to our 10 myths of running debunked. And really the main source of injury for running is improper loading. Doing too much or too much for too long or too much for too soon, basically too much. So it doesn't matter on shoes, biomechanics, running terrain, etc., etc. It really has to do with how you're listening to your body and how you're loading. So this is key. And in a triathlon program, cycling is actually a really good complement. It's very rare I run more than 3 runs a week, sometimes 4 if it's a brick workout, which means you run after the bike to get those legs used to that. But if you're cycling, swimming, you don't need to be running crazy amount of mileage because, again, that biking is really going to complement. Even the swimming cardiovascular-wise, your heart and lungs and those systems that produce energy, they don't really know what you're doing. They just respond to the effort demands. So, again, it all complements. It may not be perfectly specific, but, again, it works. Brick runs are important. So brick runs are exactly how they sound, running with brick legs. No, running off the bike. So doing a nice hard bike or some sort of challenge on the bike and getting used to getting the legs working after that. The mechanics of cycling are substantially different than running, and usually you find when you get off, you might start running kind of like you're cycling in a more circular motion before you find your natural stride. It can also be a change with cadence of the bike compared to cadence on the run. So sometimes if you're a grinder on the bike, pedaling at a low RPM, you're going to have to really focus on picking up that stride rate when you hit the run and you want to go fast. So getting used to that, the more you can get the legs underneath you, the sooner, the better. I said that totally wrong. If you're doing a sprint triathlon, even more important, if you're doing Ironman, actually, you got lots of time. You have a whole half marathon before you need to warm up for the last bit. So again, I already mentioned I usually only do 2 to 3 runs. I'll bump that up to 3 to 4. But again, if you're doing 2 to 3 runs and doing a full complement of cycling and swimming, maybe even some strength training, you're probably going to be good. And then run training should also consist of, all the key elements. This is one I really need to drive home with my athletes. Warm up. Don't be a Strava slave. Go out the side, press go and start running as fast as you can and try to get the quickest average pace that you can post possible, which means running as hard as you can to your door when you press stop and you're done. Worst way to train. So take your time, walk, ease into a jog. So gradually build it up for 5-6 minutes. Then I would highly recommend do some running drills. Do some hamstring scoops, some ankling, get those going. Maybe some marching. This is actually the sequence that I go through. Some butt kickers, some lateral shuffle, move in a different plane of motion. Maybe finish off with a couple high knees or strides or A skips. Anyway, all this work will not only for injury prevention, but for improved mobility, improved running performance, this will go a long, long way. So please throw in some running drills, 20, 30 seconds of each one, maybe a little jog in between if you like, and then you're going to be ready to go. If it's a harder effort workout, then I would say throw in some strides. Those are higher efforts, not all out, but fast foot speed as you can, so super high stride rate. And even if you like, you can add some other builds or some higher intensity efforts just to make sure all the systems are primed, ready to go before you do hit that main set. It also gives you time for your body to tell you, should you do this workout or not? If you're feeling like there's some niggle you're working through or energy just isn't there, this is the time to make that decision whether you pull the chute, make an adjustment, or proceed with the planned workout. So warm-up drills. Make sure you're running intervals just like swimming, and cool down. That would be the second one. Ease it down. Don't finish your run on a peak. I see so many people doing this where, I got 500 meters left. I'm just going to give her. No, that should be the time you go the other direction. Ease it down. You're trying to set yourself up for success for the next workout, not finish this one strong. If you've done the work, great, you're done. Don't have to kill yourself, and that should be the way you approach every workout. It's looking at a training block, multiple weeks of workouts, not just one, and you want to feel good for all of them or as many as possible. So basic run equipment, obviously shoes are number one. I have a number of different shoes. I do train in carbons. I train in non-carbons. I got comfier shoes or more cushion for the longer runs so I can repeat those runs or have less impact stress on my body during those runs. So, it really depends on how you want to approach it, but I would say if your shoes are over a year old and you've been running consistently in them, it's probably time for some new ones. So I will typically, once a season, pick up 4 or 5 pairs. I'll cycle through them depending on what type of workouts I'm doing, and I'm pretty good for most of the year. Anywho, hydration, again, if you can pick up a fuel belt if you want your hands free, or you got a little water bottle you can carry, or a water bottle with, something that your hand can wrap around easier. Camelbacks are okay. Obviously, when it gets warm, maybe not so much. But again, if you can stay on top of your hydration, your electrolytes, and your carbohydrates, you're going to perform a lot better across what I just said, the whole block of workouts, than just getting done this one run. Obviously, running apparel, totally up to you. Moisture wicking is always good, but dress for the occasion. Smartwatch is pretty much what we're tracking everything on. Again, there are so many out there. I won't even get into those. And on that technology, again, smartwatch is typically standard nowadays. The optical sensor is probably the worst place for a heart rate, as well as it often gets misinterpreted as your running cadence, because it's really just shooting light in and measuring the changes of the light on the way back. And sometimes when you're running and jostling around, then it gets confused. And you got a lot of things running through there. So if you can get a heart rate strap, if you're going to use heart rate as either a driver or just a correlator metric, heart rate strap is going to be best. Ladies, I know the sport bras gets in the way. Garmin does make a sport bra snap-on one that you can buy. It's a little more expensive. Or they're starting to come out with the armbands now, which seems like a better solution than the wrist alone. But if you're just working off your regular watch, it is what it is. Just be aware it may not always be accurate. Or it'll be consistently inaccurate. And I mean, that's not a bad thing either. Again, if you want to go to the next level, you can add foot pods that are going to measure your stride length, your vertical oscillation, some of those other metrics a little more accurately than what the wrist is trying to do for you. You can go to the point where stride power pods, you can do train by power, which again, just like the bike, would be the best because it doesn't matter on the terrain like I already talked about, but you can go a little bit cheaper. I would say if you are going to run online on a treadmill, so if you're going to ride on Zwift, you can also run on Zwift. I have a stride power pod primarily for running on Zwift. Other pods will work as well, or some of the heart rate accelerometers or wristwatches now, some of the newer ones will also connect to Zwift. You may need to calibrate them a little bit, but that's our easy way to conduct some of the workouts, just like biking. It tells you how fast to run, you change the treadmill, and there's even treadmills now that are compatible that will actually do everything for you, so if you got the money. So, Triathlon and Training Peaks would be the last element. And of course, I already just talked about Zwift if you wanted to make those indoor runs a little more engaging. Now, run zones have the most types of metrics, or yeah, I'll leave it at that. They're the most metrics that you could prescribe training by exist in running. So you could do it by heart rate. Again, heart rate's not the best because it does lag and there are variables that will impact your heart rate from day to day. Pace is great and usually the default, but as soon as you start running hills, that one kind of goes out the window. Then you may want to default to heart rate. So knowing where, for example, your zone 2 heart rate is, if you start running uphill, understanding there's a 30-second to a minute lag of your heart rate, but if it spikes way above your zone 2 heart rate and you're supposed to stay there, then you can ease the pace back until you kind of settle back down. If the hill's long enough, that makes sense. Sometimes they're just little bumps and you're going to have those spikes and it is what it is. The last one, again, being power, and power is power. It's instantaneous feedback of the effort that you're doing, uphill, downhill, treadmill, doesn't matter. But it's going to be a little bit more of an investment if you go that route. So determining your training zones, very similar to the biking. However, running's a little different. There's a little more subjectivity to it. It's not, a lot of people will just try to do it the same way and they'll do a 5K or a 10K. If you're a faster runner, obviously a 10K is going to be better because we're looking for your steady state effort, for your best steady state effort for a half hour to an hour. So if you're running a 5K in under 20 minutes, well, may as well go up to the 10K test and get a better understanding of what pace you can actually hold for those longer durations. If you're a slower runner, do the 5K. Faster runner, do the 10K. This is an example of one of the tests that I did. I can't scroll across the data here, but it should be just like the bike, evenly as paced as possible. If you're not sure, you may have to try it out a little bit. You can also do some test runs where, do 10-minute intervals, try to figure out, is this what I could hold for about an hour or for half hour to an hour? Pay attention to the breathing. The breathing should be labored to the point where if someone was to talk to you, you can get out a word or two, but you could not have a conversation. And, that should give you an idea about where your run functional threshold is. And that would be a good starting point for the next 5K or 10K test that you do. So once you do the test, you're basically going to look at where the pace average is, and that's going to be pretty close to your threshold. If, again, if I was running a 10K at, let's say at 4 minutes per kilometer, it took me 40 minutes. I'm going to be pretty happy. My average pace is going to be pretty darn close to my FTP. If I'm running a little shorter, say I did a 5K, I was short for time, I would probably take 95 or 93% of that and apply it. Heart rate, very similar, where you're kind of looking at where it is. It kind of peaks out, doesn't go up anymore. I shouldn't say that. There could be a slight drift up, especially if you're doing this on a treadmill with the heat. So that's something to make note of and to consider. But as you look at the data, you can kind of see where the heart rate settles in at. It may change 2 or 3 beats, but that'd be a pretty good indication of where your threshold heart rate is as well. So that is it for testing. Now we're going to flip over to TriDot here. Okay, now we're going to get into the practical side and actually walk through how to set up your training platform. Now, I'm going to use TriDot because that would be my top recommendation just due to the sophistication and customization of your current fitness level, your goals. Far out exceeds what software like Training Peaks currently does. That being said, if you are training with the Kelowna Triathlon Club and you just want to plug into the program, I do have a complete other tutorial that you can follow on the back end when you join the club. So you could go that route as well. But if you are, again, looking for a custom training plan for, I would say, a pretty good price, you can get a 10-week trial, which gives you even more bonus. And then after that, it can range anywhere from 15 to, I think, 120 per month. So what I would recommend doing, head over to the Kelowna Triathlon Club website. That's kelownatriathlon.club.com. Click on the custom training plans up in the top menu bar, and that will give you access to the 10-week free trial. So you can just click on this button here and it'll take you to the sign up. Now you're going to sign up for the free trial, which is 2 weeks. And during that 2-week period, you will receive an email that allows you to extend for an additional 8 weeks. Now, during that phase, they'll give you a link. You will have to put in some of your payment information. That keeps all the bots out and hopefully makes sure you're actually going to train. And keep an eye on your junk or spam folders because sometimes it ends up in there. You don't want to miss that additional extension. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through the setup, get your account set up. The most important aspect of getting set up, I got logged out. I'm going to have to refresh and log back in. I clicked on my link. 1 sec. So I'm back in now. As you are going through the setup steps, the most important aspects are going to be setting your DOT scores, which are basically setting your thresholds for swim, bike, and run if you're on TriDot, or your run threshold if you're just on RunDot. And you have 2 different options on how you can approach it. One, you could test prior so that you know your swim, bike, and run thresholds or DOT scores before you start the tutorial, and you can just say, I know what it is and I'm just going to input it. Or you can just set it up. You can use a guess, or you can go through the wizard. Well, it will ask you a couple questions about your riding durations and speeds and whatnot, or running, swimming, etc. It's going to estimate based on your inputs. You may or may not be accurate in those inputs as well, and I can guarantee you the whole accuracy will definitely be a little bit suspect. So it doesn't matter though. You can change everything on the back end after the fact. All you need to do is get set up, and then we can progress from there. So don't get held up on the DOT scores. If you don't know it, make it up, and I'm going to show you how to refine that going forward. Once you've done that, you will have access to your platform. In the training drop-down, you're going to have your calendar view, which shows you all your workouts, and we're going to dig into those in a second. You're also going to have your intensities, which again are based on your TriDot scores. So you have your swim zones, your bike zones, and your run zones. And if those don't look right, again, we will do some testing to set them. You will do that under the threshold history. And again, we got swim, bike, and run. I wouldn't say, again, these are of any degree of accuracy as I set up this little test account. So if that is the same for you, we're going to want to do some tests. Now, the way you can do that is, again, you can just go to the pool, do your CSS test, your 400 or 200. You could jump on the bike. If you've never done an FTP test on the bike before, you can do a ramp test if you're riding on a software platform and you have a trainer with a power meter or your bike has a power meter. That would be what I recommend. Or you can do the full 20-minute test. But again, if you haven't done one of those before, it's really hard to pace, and I would start with a ramp test first. Running, same deal. You could jump right into a 5K or a 10K, but if you haven't been doing much running, what I would suggest would be a more subjective interval test where you're doing intervals of around, I'd say, over 10 minutes or around 10 minutes, and slowly progressing up, maybe 3 10-minute intervals where you're getting up to the point where breathing becomes really labored, and if someone was to have you a conversation or say ask you a question, you might be able to squeeze out a word or two, but you wouldn't be able to have a conversation. So you can play with that as a gauge in terms of intensity. Again, threshold should be all breathing, squeeze out a word or two, but that's how you should feel. And intensity-wise, again, it's hard, but you should be able to hold that intensity for a half hour to an hour. So you can, again, go and do a 5K or a 10K, depending on the speed of runner you are, or do a little bit of a step test like that through an interval workout, and you can kind of dial it in a bit from there. The other thing that you can do, you see a bunch of sample workouts, but you can turn any workout. So let's say, for argument's sake, on Monday I was starting and I wanted to actually do my CSS test. I can click on that workout, and instead of doing the workout, click on the little drop down menu here, the 3 lines, scroll down and click on perform assessment. And that is going to change it to, you have a selection of the 400 or 200. I'm going to confirm it, and then it'll actually give you the workout to do. So it's changed that workout in your calendar, and you can go do it and test your swimming. You can do the exact same for biking. Again, instead of doing this workout, click on the drop down, scroll down, perform assessment. And you can do this right out the gate, or you could wait and do some random training. But again, I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into the target paces or powers or heart rates. So I can perform a 20-minute power test. I can do a 15-mile or a 25-kilometer time trial. I wouldn't do the time trials per se. Time on a bike is terrible. I don't even know, to be honest, why they use these metrics. Probably for people who don't have power, obviously. But you can get good steady heart rate. If you are going to do a ride outside or even indoors by distance, try to get a heart rate on your a heart rate monitor on, and at least you'll be able to get some idea of where threshold heart rate might land. But again, if you have power, pick the 20-minute power test, confirm that. Again, it'll switch the workout. And then, of course, I can do the exact same thing with the run, and just not to leave the run out again. Don't test on the same day. If you can leave some good gaps where you're going to fully recover, some of these tests are pretty stressful. So high level of training stress and could require a little additional recovery. Whoops, I didn't want to manually complete. I want to perform assessment. And again, 5K or 10K. If you're running sub 20-minute 20-minute 5Ks, or I'll just say that. If you're running sub 20-minute 5Ks, do the 10K test. If you're more like a half-hour 5K, perfect. Same for the 10K. If you're a little quicker runner, run the 10K. That way you're going to get a better idea of what your pace is going to be for half hour to an hour, so you land in that range. Confirm that, and again, you got the workouts all set up. Now, as I mentioned, I wouldn't do these 3 days in a row. I would spread them out across the week, or even spread them into next week and give myself a little bit of time. But if you get going in your training and you're like, man, this is way too fast, or this is way too slow, or my heart rate's way off compared to my pace, then this takes a little bit of dialing. This is usually what I spend most of the time the first month when I'm working with athletes, trying to figure out and dial in. And everyone's a little bit different in terms of, your strengths and weaknesses, your aerobic capacity, your anaerobic capacity, your speed, power, etc. So sometimes this takes a little bit of finagling, that's not even a word, whatever, to get. So once you do that and you do any of the tests, this is where you can come back in. You can leave these in here. I wouldn't edit it. It's always easier just to start a new one. And you can input this information, when you did it, the time, where your location is. Again, that's going to matter if you are at elevation or at sea level, so it'll factor that in. It'll also matter based on weather if you went outside, but if it was an indoor, click on indoor. And then you'll progress along. This all looks good. These are set in my default, so I'm just going to leave them where they're at. And then you're going to click I know my FTP, and you can input it there. Now for swimming, I'll actually retract that a little bit. Because you have to put your 400 time and a 200 time into a CSS calculator, I guess I give you the equation. You could do it yourself, but it will be easier to say, let us calculate your FTP, enter your 400 time. I don't know, I'm going to say 6 minutes. Oops, 6 minutes. And then we'll say for argument's sake, your 200 time has to be faster or it won't work. 2:55. Anyway, there we go. And click through, confirm, and my new CSS is going to be 132 per 100 meters. It's dropped me down from my dot score predictor, and hopefully this is going to be a lot more accurate. And if it's not, you can continually tweak a little bit. I would say testing usually around 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it's 8 weeks, depending on how the training is going, but you can expect to always check in on these as you progress. You want to increase your zones so that your training stays accurate or useful, impactful. So same for the bike. You can click on add. Same information. I'm just going to use my current location. I'm going to say I did it indoors. If that was the case, great. Again, all my defaults are there. And this one, I'm going to click on my FTP. Zwift, when I finished my ramp test or my 20-minute power, told me I was 300. If you did the ramp test, you're not going to be able to get the heart rate, but if you did the 20-minute test and you kind of see where it leveled out, I'm going to say for argument's sake, I leveled out around 150 beats per minute. I can progress, confirm all that, and then again, it'll update. So I went from this time low to high. So again, hopefully that's more accurate. If you do the same thing, add a run, again, location, I'm going to use my current location, indoor, outdoor, whichever way you do it. Again, indoor on a treadmill is really nice because you can control for as many variables as possible. If you go outdoor, pick a nice flat route. Moving forward, this all looks about right. And again, you have a choice. You can either input your FTP if you know it. So if you know what kind of pace you landed at, you can do that and enter your pace in here. If it gave you power data and heart rate, awesome. Or you can let them calculate FTP. If you know your 10K time, let's say I ran it in 40 minutes. So I need to do 0, I messed that up last time. 40 minutes and no seconds. Power, no idea. Heart rate, average heart rate across, again, might be a little bit higher. And then I'm going to confirm, and that's going to update. Oh, I was bang on that one. I got one. So that will be the most important thing to get set up in terms of training prescription. Because when we open up any of these workouts, like this bike workout here, all of these intensities are based on your threshold power. So we want to make sure that that's set correctly so that we're getting into the right zones for all of these. But again, if they feel off in the beginning, go more by just feel and you can continually tweak and refine as we go. So the next thing to do that will impact your training program will be to put in your races. So that's where you're going to come down here and click on Race X. And this is one of the coolest functions, in my opinion, where if it is a generic race or a bigger race, usually you can search it and they may have it there for you. Pretty much most Ironman races are in there. Let's see what it comes up with. Yeah, so, and I got lots of these to choose from. If it is a local race, then we can build that in there as well. So first of all, we're just going to go simply to My Races, and I'm going to click on Add a Race. Now, the priority here, you can just see if you were to do the race, kind of where would I be sitting at? So that would be the sim only. If you want to schedule it, and sorry, you can do a sim and then schedule it after the fact if you like. But if you already know it's going to be going in there, you can choose whether it's a priority A, B, or C race. Priority A race, you are going to peak and taper the most for, so the training plan is really going to gear towards that one. A B race, you may taper and rest a little bit for that race, but training is going to, still be a little more consistent. And then priority C, you're basically just going to train through that race as if it's not even there and work towards the A's or B's. Now, you can't put too many A's too close together. It won't peak you out like that. So you do have to be, specific on where you're going to peak. So anyway, I'm going to pick the Cherry Blossom as the A race of the season. And that's not a bad thing if you're going to, say, do an A race early in May and then do another A race in, July, August. That works quite well. The race selection will be a triathlon. The distance is going to be a sprint. And I'm going to add a custom race because it's not in there. Not important enough. So Cherry Blossom Triathlon, it is located, I can put in Kelowna or I can put in the address. It's 4075 Gordon Drive, Kelowna, so I know exactly where it is. The date, this will come in to play when it's trying to figure out the temperatures on the day. So it'll figure out, look at history. What do the average temperatures look like? What does the wind typically do on the race day? And that's it. I'm going to confirm that. And it is in my calendar. Now, it's going to take a little bit of time for it to make all the adjustments to the training program because it's basically going to make you a custom training plan from now, your fitness level, all the way up until race day. Now, I'll let it think for a sec. There we go. So I have it on the calendar here. If I click on the hourglass, that is going to look into the race a little bit more. And this is going to be assuming it is dead flat. And obviously, it's put in some random values here. So the swim is only 700 meters, not 750. It's not in the lake. So there is some adjustments that you do need to do. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to want to change is the distance for the swim. So I can click on the swim plan. Now, when you use my link, you get the highest version, the Legends access, and I turn on all these different features. If you don't use my link or just go in general, you may not have the ability to do all of these changes. So just be aware of that. Now, the distance is up here. I'm just going to click on the hamburger menu here, edit this plan, and this is where I can make my adjustments. So it's a 700-meter swim. It's in a pool. Again, start time if you like, no wetsuits. If you want to name a plan to have different plans, great. But that's pretty much all I'm going to do. So I'm going to click on save there. It's going to update the plan. And again, it's going to give me my predicted swim time of 10:23, which, boy, I wish people would use this and put in an accurate swim estimation. That would make everyone's lives way easier. So next I am moving on to the bike. Now, if I click on the bike plan, I do have the ability, when I click on this, to do a whole bunch of personalization based on the routes. And then, of course, it will figure out the weather, the wind, the gradients. It'll give you projections on speed as you go uphill, especially that one on swamp. You can also play around with some different what-if scenarios if you want to play around with your average power, your different bike weights, race weights, your aerodynamics, etc. So we can go pretty in depth there. However, we need a route to link to it. So to do that, I'm just going to go back out here. I'm going to go over to my races here and to routes. So I need to add a route. To do a custom route, we need a particular file of that route. So I'm going to click on the add a route here, and it's going to be a bike route. I'm going to use elevation from the file. Now to get the GPX file, if you go to the Cherry Blossom website, this is the best I've come up with at the moment. Go to race information and course maps. And when you scroll down, you're going to see a download GPX file button. That being said, it is going to take you to Strava. Hopefully you have a Strava account. And from there, you're just going to click on the drop down here and export GPX. Once you do that, it will download it. And I'm going to do the same thing just for the run course as well, even though it's dead flat, so it doesn't matter that much for the run. But I'm going to hit the run file. Brings me over to here. You can see the run, the elevation. It's got this little weird thing in here, though. I don't like that, but whatever. And then I'm going to click on Export GPX for that one, too. So now that I have those two downloaded, I can take it. I can drag it into RaceX here. Hope it doesn't log me out. And pop the bike route right into this little square. It'll do some thinking. And there's our little bike route. This is a profile, obviously 3 loopers for the sprint triathlon. I didn't build the super sprint. Maybe I'll do that at another time. But that is all you do. So then you're going to click on this little, oh no, I don't want to download it. I already downloaded it. I go back out. Done and done. Now I can do the same for the run route. I'm going to add a route. Which one was the run? The middle one. Run. I titled it. That was smart. And here's the run route, the profile. Again, very little elevation change. And then I'm just going to go back out. So now that I have the runs or the routes in my routes, now I can go back to my races. So it's not in the same place. I can go back into the Cherry Blossom. And then I'm going to go back to the bike. We'll do the bike first. Again, the power, if you click on that, it's going to ask you to link a route. And I can go to my routes. The only one I should have in there is the Cherry Blossom. So I'm going to select that one, confirm it. And now it's going to update all my projections, all the elevations, all the different things we can play with based on the actual route itself. Now, race projections will get more accurate the more training you do and the closer you get to the event, because you never know whether you're going to train well or fall off or what might happen. But as you can see here, I can see the route. I can see my paces, my speeds, sorry. I can see my nice consistent power all the way across if I was to hold consistent power and what would happen if I did that. And this is where we can play around with, and it's going to optimize here where maybe I should push uphill a little bit harder because I'm going to have more gains in time going uphill than I will downhill due to drag. Obviously, there's an exponential curve for especially wind resistance. So there's only so much speed you can gain going downhill, but you can get a lot more going uphill. The question being is how hard should you push uphill? And this can go to the point where it will say, hold this pace, power, heart rate going uphill. That will maximize your time around the track here. So this might take a little bit of thinking time. So we'll come back in a second on this one. All right, I'm going to come back to it. It's going to do a lot of thinking. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next video. And then again, I can do the same thing for the run plan. I can update it to make it a little more accurate. Again, if you click on pace, it'll do the same thing. Link a plan to this route. Click on my routes. and select the cherry blossom, which will be a little bit shorter than 5K the way it times out, or depending what line you run. And again, it'll do the same thing here with the route. And it will probably update, I shouldn't say probably, it'll update your target times that you can expect to run on. So once you've done all that and it looks good, then you can click back on the TriDot, go back to your calendar. It's going to optimize all your training again. You may see it take a little bit of time to think through it and make all the changes, and then you are basically off in training. Now, there's a few other things in terms of if you want to connect to a coach. Again, if you use my link, great, you're connected to me, and I would unlock all these additional benefits, or a bunch of additional benefits, like some of those advanced race planning strategy things, which again would be good for 10 weeks. After that, depending on what level of plan you chose, you may or may not keep that. Same with some of the video tutorials, strength training, the advanced metrics, things like that. So you can connect to another coach if you want to work with someone else who's a TriDot coach. There's a little TriDot community as well that'll take you over to. The metrics, I showed you a little bit of this. Obviously, I don't have any training data in here, but you can access all the data that is feeding the system to make the changes for you. The nice thing is, unlike Training Peaks, you don't have to understand any of this. It'll do it for you. But if you're curious, then you can do that as well. I can't do this yet because I need to connect some devices, and then my training stresses, again, I'm not worried about at the moment. If you want to go to the nth degree and upload your genome, your 23andMe or Ancestry.com, you can upload the file here, and it will change your training plan based on your genetics and how well you actually absorb training. And then you can also do a little swim form analysis here, answering this little questionnaire, and it will questionnaire, and it will give you personalized drills based on kind of your swimmer profile and where you're at as a swimmer. So it can do a little bit of customization on that front. The last things to go through are down here under the settings cog. Your profile, you can set up entering all your personal information if you like. This information is important as well, your swim age, bike age, run age, which is basically how long have you been swimming, biking, and running. And I'd say fairly consistently. So if you swam once 20 years ago and haven't swam since, 1 year or 0 years. But this will also impact some of the programming. Basically, the more history you have in a given sport, it assumes you can handle more load. So you can complete that. If you go to account, again, you can see your personal information here, what kind of subscription you're on and when it expires and everything. If you decide to move on, you'll have your billing information and billing history in your account as well. I can use this menu if it's easier too. So preferences, this is where we're going to do a little bit of work. Recommended to leave everything on standard unless there's an area you really want to hit more volume on, and I wouldn't do it on the run. So you can flip these up from standard to high. It's a lot of volume. I'm on high swim and high bike, and it's 17 plus hours a week right now, which I can't even do. So standard, you're going to get well enough work in there. If you want, you can actually click on the advanced settings and say, I want exactly 2 swims or 3 swims or 4 swims a week. So you can set that. However, the system won't be able to optimize as well if there's a little bit of flexibility in there, because it's always monitoring your stress and rest. So again, if you can avoid changing those, avoid changing those. But if you need to, that's all good. If you swim with a club, for example, like you're doing 3 swims a week with the Kelowna Tri Club, then I would set the swim to 3. And then you can also change and lock in some of the days. So first, you can choose when your long bike and your long run are. It doesn't give you all the days of the week, but usually it's the weekends. Some people throw it in the middle of the week. And then the advanced settings, if you are, again, swimming on particular days, with the club, for example, you can move your, like we swim on Tuesday, Thursdays, you can move the swims to Tuesday, Thursdays. And if I actually had switched it to 3 swims, I would add my third one on the Saturday like we normally do. And then confirm that, and they will lock in on those days. Now, if you flip back to your calendar immediately, it won't have made the change in the week you're currently in. It'll make the change for next week. So you may need to manually drag and drop from time to time. And again, you can do that for the swimming and biking as well if you need a set schedule. But if you're not tied to anything like that, then I would say let it flow. You'll be better off. If you're in an off season and you're not swimming, or you want bike and run only, or only run, you can set that. And you can set a day of the week that you want off, or take no days off. But you will have some easier days if you select none. And then, of course, you can throw in other activities if you like. And if you want strength training, the Tri strength training, then you can flip that on, save it, and you are good to go. Scrolling down, this is where you probably want to do a little more preference setup. Date preference, I don't really find a difference. I don't really care, US or Met, but I do everything by metric. If you run on miles, then you'll probably want to set it to standard. But if you're doing swimming and biking and running all in the metric system, then set it to metric. So it really depends on what you like to see. Your default settings in terms of indoor, so maybe look at your thermostat. What do you keep it at? This might be a little warm for me, but the room heats up as I start heating up. So you got to keep that into consideration. And I don't usually change this. This is basically projecting out your race performances is based on you hitting about 76% of the training, which, again, hopefully you will do better than that. Last one is a big settings here. Next one is a big settings. This one, if you want daily emails too, you can flip that on. If it's before noon, you'll get it the day before, and you can sync up your calendar if you like. And then this one's the big one. So data preferences. I haven't done the connection yet, but I'm going to show you that. But I want Garmin to be my preference for swimming. I am in metric, so I'm swimming 25 meters. If you usually swim in a 50-meter pool or yards, you can change that. Warm up, cool down, I'm going to leave as is. And then I do need to set my primary data source in a second, which I'm going to show you. Bike, I can do the same thing. Figure out where I want everything to go here. If you have power, make sure it's set to power. If you don't, you can flip the heart rate or just keep it random. If you're training with nothing. But again, if you can get to the point where you're training with the power, you're going to be a lot more dialed in. I can do my low intensity heart sessions based on heart rate for a more of a physiological driver than actual power, which isn't a bad idea. And then I do find some of the workouts get into the effort too quickly for my liking. So I put 10 minutes warm up where it doesn't count towards my execution at all, but I can just gradually move into work up to the zone 2, usually where it starts you at. I can do some drills in there, whatever I like, maybe some spin ups, and that gives me a little bit more run time. It does add 10 minutes to every workout, but I would prefer to warm up. And you can do less if you want to do less, but I would put it up a little bit. It will warn you that it may mess up some of your optimization, but I'm a big proponent of warm up. And of course, you can do cool down as well if you want, but I find those are not too bad. Then same thing for running. How are you going to set it up? Again, I want it pace. If you do have a power pod or a power meter you want to run off of, you can do that. Or again, you can go to heart rate if you don't have anything else, but or if you're running lots of hills. But I would leave it on pace and use heart rate as a correlator. And of course, same idea here. If you want a little bit more of a warm up, which again, I would recommend, then you are good to go. I scrolled too far. Save here. I understand. So that would be that adding a cool down or a warm up time, additional warm up time. So the last thing as I go through, I'm going to skip over permissions. Gear, you can put your gear in here if you have, what kind of bike you're going to be riding. That will impact your race execution times. And then this is where I'm going to connect everything. So if you have a Garmin, you can connect all these softwares, Ruvi, Zwift, Polar. So I just click on connect. It's going to bring you to a little wizard where you enter your username and password. And it'll do the same for all the different, all the different connections that you might want to make. Once you have all those connections, you may want to pop over and just make sure that by default it's selected properly in your preferences down here. So it's primary data source. If you're going to be always riding on Zwift for the time being, you may as well set that to Zwift. If not, you're going outside, Garmin, or whatever you're using. So that is pretty much it for getting all set up. Now, whoops, wrong one. It's going to think a bit. So now that we have everything set up, we are all ready for either testing or training. And this one I'm going to dig into a little bit more in the next webinar because I've already probably gone well over time. And we'll talk about executing all of these, the different things you can change, why you might want to change those, what all this means, how you can make notes and log different things, connect other health data, etc., etc. So that will be the last little practical aspect of getting this all going. And after that, we'll leave a little bit of time for some specific questions on training, execution, racing, pretty much whatever you want to bring up, and we'll have a nice little final discussion. But that should give you at least enough. If you're looking for a custom training plan, need some direction to train better than just going out and randomly swimming, biking, and running, there you go. See you next time.